duper interesting.
Right.
Like Dale's a very outgoing. He, he's colorful and he's super interesting.
Yes.
And he handed me a book. I had never met him. Like it was between sermons, like between like sessions or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting with our group, with our Virginia group, and he walks over to me and we just start talking. Like there were no introductions like, hey there, I'm Dale Jenkins. And then,
wow, that was really good.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
And then hi, I'm KT from, da-da-da-da-da. There was none of that. And he just said, you seem like the kind of person that would like this. And he handed me his book. And then said, really glad y'all are here. Take care.
Yep, that's Dale.
And then walked away. And I was like really excited to read the book.
Did you read the book?
No.
Okay.
It's still it's in my bookshelf.
That sounds right.
I've noticed though that now that I'm done with my master's, like,
don't want to even look at anything.
No, I have time.
Oh, other thing.
I've started reading again.
Aw.
Like,
good for you.
Like I started reading The Hobbit. I bought the collection.
Good book
that I sent you.
Good books.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good stuff.
I'm reading those like before bed.
Nice.
And it's so exciting.
It's a pretty good series. Like it's one of those that
the best. No. It's not a pretty good one.
It's the best series. It's one of those that even though you know what's happening, you're excited for.
Yes, I've read them before.
Yeah.
Watched all the movies more times than I'd like to admit. Actually, I would like to admit that.
Yeah,
I've watched
that's
them
a good thing to admit.
But it's they're so good. Even when you know what's about to happen, you still get excited for it.
Yeah.
If there was a series of movies and books that I could read and watch again for the first time,
it would be the Bible. Well, that's not a series of movies.
Yeah.
Yet.
Thanks a lot.
You never know.
The Chosen.
Kinda.
Sorta.
Yeah.
That was a good series.
It was a good series. I'm excited for the next season.
Yeah, they set a release date?
Season 4 trailer's out, yeah.
Ooh.
I don't know if there's a release date, but the trailer's out.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back to the
Smooth.
Well, it seemed like a decent enough segue.
Yeah, okay.
To the Valley Bible Studies podcast where
you got it.
Man, why? You couldn't have let me have it and just keep going. You had to point out that that's the first time. The Valley Bible Studies podcast.
He's been practicing, everybody.
Why are you trying to make me look bad? I don't appreciate that. Whatever.
It's too late now. It's in the recording.
Here's the thing. Do you know why it's gotten easier to say Valley Bible Studies podcast? Because I've been telling people about it, man.
About how you messed it up?
No, dude. That's so mean. What have I done to you? I've done nothing but help you and been nice to you.
Anyway,
dude. No, I've been telling people about it. And here's the thing. People, if you're listening, it would help us tremendously, and we would be infinitely grateful if you spread the word about the Valley Bible Studies podcast.
Yes, it would.
I haven't messed up once. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, okay. You're like 4 for 4 now.
Yeah,
so.
And if you haven't done it yet, 5 stars on Spotify, Apple, Amazon. Jinx.
Dadgummit.
And because that one, the higher the ratings we have, the more it's going to be like the more it's going to pop up for like the suggested. Like we suggest you listen to this. The higher ratings we have, the more that's likely. And
the point of the pod is to get the word out there.
The point of the pod isn't to hear KT and Luke. The point of the pod is
you can do that anytime. Right. We talk plenty.
Man, you are making us sound really. Anyway, it's to get people looking at the Bible. That's the whole point of the podcast.
Right.
That's the whole point of Valley Bible Studies in general.
Is to get people looking at the Bible.
Right. Because it's not about KT and Luke. We're fine.
Yeah. That's a good summary.
But in summation, the Bible is what we are trying to get people to look at.
Right.
We're not trying to get people to listen to us. We're trying to get people to read the Bible. And if this is the first step, awesome. But it can't be the first step if nobody sees the Valley Bible Studies podcast.
Correct.
I've said it like 7 times and I've got it right every time.
Good job, buddy.
In your face.
I'm sorry. It's all my fault.
I never thought I'd hear those words from you.
Wow. Now who looks bad? I'm not that self-centered.
So we're looking at John today, and what a doozy.
Yeah. Especially because, like, so John is the fourth gospel. It's the last one.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the most different. So the other three are very similar. And John's telling the same story, but he's telling different parts in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to sort of almost
hit a reset?
Almost not unlearn, but like reevaluate a lot of what you've heard from the other three.
Because you kind of, once you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you're kind of like in this zone.
You got a groove going.
Right. And then you get to Luke, or you get to John, and you go, whoa.
This is different.
Wait a minute.
Well, it helps that John goes back to like before Jesus was born.
Yeah.
And like before anything was born.
I also really like the narrative in which it's written.
Yeah. It's a much more like Matthew and Mark and Luke have some short stories that they line up very quickly. John takes his time.
Yeah. And it's a little more personable.
Right.
You know?
Which, I mean, we're talking about John. This is Jesus's earthly best friend, basically.
Right. Which, dude, that's got to be cool.
Yeah. I mean, only he can say that, really.
Yeah.
Like maybe Peter, but even then, John has a special relationship there.
I feel like John had the closer relationship, but Peter was always the guy.
Peter was the leader among the group.
He was the responsible one. Like, they were all responsible, but he's kind of the go-to. Like, right. I really need something done.
He's the biggest voice.
Right. I really need something done. Hey, Peter. Da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. Right.
John is the one with the personal relationship there.
Right. And to where, if you kind of look at that, both are very, like, incredibly valuable in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you want somebody that's going to be incredibly responsible, and you also want somebody that's going to be incredibly personable.
And you want somebody... So if you're trying to fashion the story of Jesus, you want the gospel accounts that are shorter but faster. You want this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And you get that mostly in Mark, but Matthew and Luke do that quite a bit. But you also want here's one of Jesus's entire conversations. Here's like an entire paragraph of things where he's talking about like his relationship with his father, and how that translates to his relationship with people.
And that's where the personable side of John really comes in, because you feel like you're there almost when you're reading through that.
You're a fly on the wall for these conversations that he's having.
And that's what makes it makes it easy to read. It makes it easy to relate to. And it really shows that, I don't want to say human side of Jesus, but in a sense, because...
His relationship side.
Their relationships with Jesus. And that's really cool. And that kind of takes us to John chapter 8. And so in John chapter 8, we see that they're having conversations with Jesus. He's, he's talking about a bunch of different things. He's talking about the Pharisees talking to him.
It's important to notice that this is public. So there are different conversations that are private and public.
Right.
This one is, everybody can hear this.
Mm-hmm. And so he's talking about bearing witness to himself in verse 14. And then he talks about how he judges, right? Verse 15, you judge according to the flesh, I judge no one. And if you were to read that out of context, what?
Right.
But keep going.
How many times does the New Testament talk about Jesus as the righteous judge?
Exactly.
But he's got a point.
So, and then he says in 16, if I do judge, my judgment is true.
Right.
There are times where, we're quick to judge, but
Jesus is using the word judge differently. Jesus is judging based on a standard. We judge based on what we think. Right. Jesus is using the word judge as in judging against the standard of righteousness.
Right. Which we always fall short of.
Right.
And he never has and never will. And then, so what the weird thing about chapter 8 is the confusion later on in the chapter. Because, or about midway through the chapter. So you go to verse 18, right? Jesus says, I am one. There's our singular again. We talked about that in the previous episodes. The singular. I am one who bears witness of myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness of me. Okay. See that connection with him and the Father? Cool. Verse 19. Then they said to him, where is your Father? Okay. Jesus answered. Get an answer. It's great. Get an answer. Hey, where's your Father? We're excited.
Jesus doesn't always answer the question.
Right. Sometimes he kind of goes around it.
Yeah.
To give his own point, which is always valuable, but we get an answer. And let's hear the answer, right? They're excited. We're excited. Let's hear the answer. You know neither me nor my Father.
What?
If you had known me, you would have also known my Father.
What? We've been talking to you for like an hour.
Just imagine the disciple. We just wanted to know where your Father was. We've known you for a while, Jesus.
What does that mean?
We know who you are. We just want to know where your Father is. And then Jesus say, you don't know me or my Father. If you have known, you know?
And there are people standing there who are like, you're Jesus.
Imagine
your
the people
dad
that
was
don't
Joseph.
Right. Imagine the people that
you grew
don't
up
know
in Nazareth
as well.
Yeah.
Because you got the
people who are like, this is their first sermon, quote unquote.
Because you got the ones closer
of Jesus that they're hearing.
You've got the ones closer, and they're confused. Imagine the confusion of the people who just kind of got there. What? So, okay. These words, verse 20, these words Jesus spoke in the treasury, and he taught in the temple, and no one laid hands on him, for this hour has not yet come. Okay, so now Jesus is talking about his departure, like how he's going to leave. In verse 21, Jesus said to them, I am going away, and you will seek me, and you will die in your sin. Where I go, you cannot come. Again.
Huh?
What?
Okay, so first of all, you're in Jerusalem for this. Like it just said, he's teaching in the treasury, he's teaching in the temple.
Yep.
We're pretty familiar with how Jerusalem is laid out at this point. What do you mean there's like a street or a road or a way that you know that we don't?
Because they don't understand where he's going.
Right.
And so
they think
when
that
he
he's
says
leaving Jerusalem in a certain way, and they're like, okay, there are only so many gates.
Right. Like if you leave, we're going to be able to see you leave, and we can just, follow you. But Jesus is saying, where I go, you cannot follow. Okay, fine. So the Jews, in their mind, they're like, okay, well then, we see in verse 22, okay, Jesus is going to kill himself. Because that's the only way we're not going to be able to follow him.
Right.
And then...
Which proves how much they lack the spiritual discipline and the spiritual dynamic of what he's saying.
Right. Because they're like,
because that's like the most physical way, the most like earthly way to interpret that.
That's their logic. Right. That's their logic. And that's one of those things. I'm going to get off topic just a second. That's one of the, I know. KT going down a rabbit hole. Shocker. That's one of those things where, because I'm one of the kind of people that I'm going to figure it out myself. Because I like to think that I'm pretty logical. There's a way to do it. I'm going to find that way. There's an answer. I'm going to get there through a certain avenue. Right. And typically it's going to be, a reasonable and logical avenue. And the gospel and salvation is not that. You cannot figure out heaven. You cannot figure out the Bible with logic. You can't figure out Jesus with logic. That's not what it's meant for.
The gospel makes perfect sense, and it makes no sense at all at the same time.
Exactly. And because I think I'm logical, it actually makes it harder for me sometimes. And that's because
I want to do it my way.
Right. And if I start figuring out, like, especially when I was younger, like late teens, early 20s, and trying to logically think of how Jesus came to earth, how God is real, how heaven is waiting for me, and all of that. And I'm thinking from my earthly mind, my earthly logical mind, that all of this is reasonable and feasible, then, well, there's no way.
So to flash forward a little bit, Paul in Colossians chapter 3 will talk about setting your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. One of the big reasons that he says that in chapter 3 is because of what he's already said in chapter 2. Because in chapter 2, he's talking to the Colossians and he says, there are these people who are trying to lead you astray from the gospel using those logical pathways, using philosophy, which was big in the Greek-speaking world, using out of context Old Testament evidence, using different theories about what Jesus' coming to earth actually looked like. And Paul says, the way that you avoid being misled by worldly logic is by taking yourself out of the worldly mindset altogether, and you look up instead of out.
Yes. In summation, yes. But
easier said than done.
Yeah, that's so, because again, everything else that we do in this life is based off of this life. It's based off what we do on earth. And, people like me, that logical line of thinking is so different than the way we should think about heaven. And we see that here because people are like the Jews and everyone around are trying to logically think, where are you going to go?
Right.
How can I not follow you? That doesn't make any sense,
and
Jesus.
Forget it later in the chapter where he says, they ask him, are you greater than our father Abraham? Because he makes a claim, and I don't remember exactly how it's worded, but he makes a claim about having been before Abraham.
Yeah, it's verse 39.
Yeah. So
he says, if you were Abraham's children,
that's what it is. Yeah,
you would do the works of
He talks
Abraham.
about I precede Abraham because I've given Abraham the pattern. So the Jews think of Abraham as their pattern. They think of him as
he's the one that started this.
He's the one that started this. He's the first person to have the special covenant relationship with God that we have. So we should look to him for an example of what that relationship should look like. And Jesus says, actually, you should look to me because I gave Abraham the pattern.
Yep. But now and then in verse 40, but now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth which I learned from God. And then, guess where Abraham got it?
Yeah. You shouldn't be looking to Abraham.
You should be
yes,
looking to me.
He's an admirable person, but he had to get this from somewhere.
Okay. Wonderful rabbit hole. Now, let's climb out of the rabbit hole.
Okay. Here's how
it all kind of tied in, though.
Right, because here's how it ends. They say, are you better than Abraham? And he says, before Abraham was, I am.
Again, probably a confusing statement.
What?
Right. Because here's the thing. Before he was, I am. But that shows that shows
terrible English.
That shows that continuity of Jesus. Because before Jesus was, he is. And Jesus alludes to it all through John about how he was there in the beginning with God. And we're going to talk more about that in when we get to chapter 17. But
he chooses his words carefully.
Yeah.
Before Abraham was, I am.
Right.
That's Exodus 3. That's Moses and the burning bush. That's Moses says, what God should I say is sending me? And God says, I am who I am. Jesus says, I'm him.
I was there for that.
I was there for that. I'm the one who said that.
Yep.
And I'm the one who gave Abraham his pattern, and I'm the one who's giving you the same pattern.
Again, when that logical mind kicks in, you're like, you can't be of the same if you're different.
Right. Yeah.
And
you couldn't have been there for Abraham and for Moses, let alone Abraham, Moses, and now.
Exactly.
That's hundreds of years.
Exactly. So that's where the logical mind fails. And then, so going back to verse 23 and 24, he's telling them where he's from. You're from below, i.e. the earth. I'm from above, i.e. heaven. And he says, you are of this world. I am not of this world. Again, for people that don't really know what's going on, probably very confusing. You're right in front of me, Jesus.
You're standing right
there.
You're
right here, and I'm pretty sure we're on planet Earth. Therefore, I say to you, verse 24, that you will die in your sins. For if you do not believe that I am he, you will die in your sins. Okay, well, that was kind of scary. Shift the vibe a little bit there. Then they said to him, who are you? Come on. It's been a while.
We just covered this.
First you asked me where my father is, and now you're asking me who I am. Are you really sure what's going on? Do you
We're in chapter 8, ladies and gentlemen. They've had time to figure this one out.
Welcome to the conversation, okay? Come on.
Yeah.
Just what I've been saying from you from the beginning. And I don't know if there was a tone of sarcasm there.
Or just pent up frustration.
I don't think Jesus was sarcastic. I'm very sarcastic.
Yeah.
I don't think Jesus was sarcastic.
So I sort of read it as they say, okay, so who are you? And he sort of just does just putting his face in his hands.
And
it's
just making that. Yeah, that
we talked about this. We've been talking.
Like I said from the beginning.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like I said from the beginning, I have many things to say and to judge concerning you. But he who sent me is true, and I speak to the world those things which I heard from him. But again, logical mind. Okay, Jesus, you heard it from him. But then you also say, you are him. Huh?
I'm confused.
If you try to apply logic, it's not going to work. So it even says in verse 27 that they did not understand him. They did not know what was going on. I want to fast forward just a little bit. Verse 31 and 32. And Jesus said to them, to the Jews that believed him. So there were Jews that believed him. If you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed. And you shall know the truth, and the truth
will make you free.
Shall make you free. That's what we got to trust in. We have to trust in the truth, because if you, when you try to think logically, when you try to piece it all together yourself, okay, that's not a bad thing to do. But when you do that, you're not trusting in the truth, you're trusting in yourself. And that's scary. It's very risky, if that's the best way to put it, for lack of a better term, at least. That's very risky, because where are you placing your faith in that moment?
Right.
You know?
Well, but the message of Jesus, if you want to think of the truth that will set you free as the entire gospel,
sure.
Where does that gospel start? It starts with, I can't get out of this by myself.
Yeah.
It starts with that humility to realize, I can't do this by myself.
Exactly.
Because only when you realize, I can't do this by myself, can you understand why Jesus came.
Mm-hmm.
Because he came because you can't do it by yourself, but he loves you enough that he wants you to still be able to do it with his help.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But it has to start there. That's sort of what he's...
It starts with
that's
surrender.
What he's sounding the alarm on in John 8 is, you all aren't quite there yet.
Because you're still trusting yourself.
Uh-huh.
And it starts with surrendering.
Right. That's so later in John chapter 12. And this is probably it's last week of Jesus' life, because it's after he comes in the triumphal entry that we've talked about in the other gospel episodes. So this is days before the cross. There are some Greek-speaking people who want to come and see Jesus. Jesus' mission for this point has been for the Jews, but he's not like actively turning people away. So one of the apostles, Philip, they come to Philip, who's from Bethsaida in Galilee. This is chapter 12, starting in verse 21. They question him, saying, Sir, we want to see Jesus. It's interesting. Philip goes and tells Andrew. Andrew goes and tells Jesus. That's always been interesting to me. But Jesus replied, The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Huh? First of all,
he knows. And
he gets it.
We know now, but
he's not.
What hour?
He's not talking specifically to the Greeks either. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't say that he went and found the Greek-speaking people and talked to them. He just says it to the crowd with them there. Mm-hmm. And he says, The hour has come, the Son of Man to be glorified. I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains by itself, but if it dies, it produces much fruit. That's the point we just made. In order for you to live, you have to die. That's like the weird paradox at the beginning of Christianity.
And to die is gain.
Flash forward to Philippians. We'll see in a few weeks. But in order for you to live, you have to die. That's the point we just made. In order for the gospel to take its effect, first there has to be that moment of humility where I say, oh, I can't do this. I can't be everything that I need to be all the time, all at once. That's when Jesus' mission toward you comes in. Verse 25, the one who loves his life will lose it. The one who hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. So now we start talking about requirements. What does it require of me to be a Christian? First is the humility, and then you pair that with patience. There's no way to do this that's an instant fix. Like, you can't just come to Jesus and say, I can't do this by myself, and he snaps and makes it all better. That's not how it works. It's paired with the patience to say, It may not all work out right now, but I trust you knowing that it's all going to work out later. 26. If anyone serves me, he must follow me. Where I am, there my servant also will be. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? But this is why I came to this hour. So again, back to the language of there's an hour coming. And the Greeks and some of the other people who are watching this are like, what hour is he talking about? Jesus knows it's the hour of his death. It's the hour when that glorification happens. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice comes from heaven. I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. A voice comes from heaven and answers what Jesus just said.
If they weren't
confused, you're the Greeks and you wanted to talk to Jesus, you basically just got 2 for 1. Because you not only did you get to talk to God the Son, you got to talk with God the Father.
But they didn't know it was God the Father at first.
They didn't know it was him, because some of them are like, that was some really weird thunder. And other ones said,
it was an angel.
It was an angel. Verse 30. Jesus responded, the voice came not for me, but for you. Now is the judgment of the world. Now the ruler of the world will be cast out. And I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. Okay, what does it require of me to be a Christian? First, I have to be humble and say, I can't do this. Mm-hmm. Then I have to pair that humility with, even if it's not an instant fix, I trust that you can do this. Even if it's not something that, like, my life's not going to get magically better in this moment right now, but you have a better plan for me moving forward. Then, in a sense, the requirement is lifted from us, because only Jesus can perfectly do what happens next, and that's the sacrifice that he made.
Right, and it's all wrapped in trust.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it, so I'm trusting you to help.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be fixed immediately, but I'm trusting that eventually it will, because you're going to help me do it.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to get to heaven, but because of your sacrifice, I trust in that sacrifice, and here we are.
Okay, and then there are 2 dimensions to, he says, if I'm lifted up from the earth, that's the cross, he's literally lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself. So there's 2 dimensions there. First of all, that's universal.
Mm-hmm.
The gospel is for everyone.
Yes. Yep.
There's nobody that is on the outside of Jesus' sacrifice. And number 2, I will draw them to myself. So what does it require of me to be a Christian? It requires me coming to the cross with Jesus. I can't be up there because he's the only one that's perfect, and he's the only one who's done everything God wants him to do, and he's the only one who can be the sacrifice for me. But I'm there.
But I'm there with him.
And his blood that is being shed on the cross is cleansing me as I'm there with him.
Right. Because he took on my sins.
Right. That's the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it is just, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And the rest of the New Testament after the Gospels is basically, okay, so Jesus just did all of this. What does that look like?
Now what?
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just like John 12 is sort of where his public ministry ends in John. And that's just a really nice way for it to end, I think.
Isn't it wild, though, that, so like you said, that's a nice way for it to end. But isn't it wild that people, when they read the Gospels, they stop there?
Right.
They read the Gospels and they're like, Jesus died for our sins, and we're there with him. His blood cleanses us. And most people would go, okay, now what? Just like we said.
Mm-hmm.
But then others go, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And I believe.
That's... You're sort of trading in the second half of that call.
Right.
Because it can't all be done on trust and patience. Are trust and patience necessary? Yeah. Yep. They're absolutely necessary, because without them, you're doing the process for the wrong reasons.
And imagine, just to draw a connection, imagine that, okay, so at the very beginning, we talked about a trilogy. We'll use the whole trilogy analogy, right? We just read the first part.
Right.
And in order for this to be whole, right, you're not just going to read the first book in a trilogy and say, I'm good.
You can almost think of the New Testament as a trilogy in that the Gospels are part 1.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Acts and the letters are part 2. Revelation is part 3.
Yeah.
Because Revelation is...
The latter letter...
And then we get to go home.
Yeah, the latter letters and then Revelation are your... It's us wrapping it up.
And then we get to go home.
Right. And so you're not going to just read the first book and go, okay, cool.
Right.
I'm okay with stopping here. Because if you are cool with stopping there, that means you didn't like it.
Right.
That means you're like, oh, this isn't for me.
But Jesus just said, I'll draw all people to myself. So yes, it is for you.
It is for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to have an open heart to be able to keep going.
Right.
And
we say you a lot. I also have to have that open heart.
Well, like we just said, it's for
right.
We.
Yeah.
There. Sorry.
No, I wasn't like criticizing you. I was just saying like.
You sure about that?
Yes,
you sure about that?
I'm just saying.
Valley Bible Studies podcast.
Good job. I'm just saying it's easy for me to say that without saying it. Does that make sense? Like it's easy for me to impose everything that we just said that's correct on other people and miss that it's also for me.
Right, because, just because we are where we are doesn't mean that we're, it's an inclusive thing.
Right.
Because it is for everyone, and we're a part of everyone. Because at one point, I was lost.
Yeah. Everybody has been lost at least once.
Exactly. And so, like you said, using you, probably not the best way because it is we.
Right.
It is up to us to keep going. And, we're going to go over all that because it doesn't stop at just believing.
Right.
We
can't replace Jesus on the cross, but we need to be there for it.
Right. And so there are more steps to that.
Right.
And we're going to cover those.
Right.
I'm looking forward to that.
That's sort of a nice segue into 17.
It is. It is.
That the whole,
because
all-encompassing part of it.
Because we see that through Jesus.
Right.
Like what he does.
Right.
Because we can say it's for everyone, but what we say is irrelevant.
Right.
What about Jesus? What does Jesus say? So in chapter 17...
before we start 17, first of all, just a disclaimer. You can go ahead and turn there and stuff, but just a disclaimer. We're skipping a lot.
Yeah, well,
I know we say that every episode, but I'm making this point specifically right now because chapters 13 through 17 are one big conversation. 13 through 17 are John's look into Jesus' last night with his followers before he dies.
It's a big conversation where Jesus does most of the talking.
Yes.
So,
it's probably a good idea to read 17 with the context of the rest of that.
Read that.
However, now 17.
Because Jesus says a lot of good stuff between 13 to 17.
Well, he also says a lot of good stuff from 1 to 21.
But I'm saying, why are you so mean to me? Like he says things like, a new commandment I give to you, chapter 13, verse 34. I give to you that you love one another as I have loved you, and you also love one another. Fast forward
14:6.
14:6. Jesus
I'm
said,
the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. That's that first half of what we just said. We can't replace Jesus on the cross.
It is through him.
But
Absolutely.
we have to follow the way to get there.
And so Jesus sets up a wonderful example of that perspective, right? When he goes to pray. So at this point, Jesus at the beginning of chapter 17 is praying for himself and for everything that's about to happen, for everything that he's done, and he gives thanks to the Father. And you look at, you fast forward in verse 6 through 19, Jesus is praying for his disciples, those that are with him, and those that are with him then, and even those that are with him now, like 2024, because people are against us. It might not be as open as it was, but people are against us. Because when we choose to do the right thing, opposed to what the world wants to do, we're going to get ridiculed. We're going to get made fun of. We're going to get poked at. And that's just the reality. And Jesus prays for that. And then in starting in verse 20, he prays for everyone. He prays for those believers. And he says,
I'm not praying for these only in reference to the apostles.
Right.
I pray for those who will believe on their word. So if you believe the New Testament, because the New Testament is what the apostles said about Jesus.
Right. And it's
for you.
And it's important to know that believe in me through their word.
Not believe in the apostles.
Exactly. Because, and we talked about this in a different episode of people wanting to, jump
Back
on
in Matthew.
Right.
Yeah.
Jump on the bandwagon of this person's so great. They're such a good gospel preacher. They're so wonderful. That's good. But are you like, what kind of bandwagon are you jumping on? Are you jumping on their bandwagon or
Jesus's?
Right.
What they're talking about.
And so it's very important to point that out, to believe in me through their word, that they may be, here it is, man, that they may be one.
Back to the singular.
We're back to, because everything, there is one Son, one God, one church. That's it, man.
And that's basically John 17 in a nutshell.
Right. Because it's all going through him.
Jesus.
It's all going through Jesus. And so he says that they may be one, verse 21, that they may be one as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they may also be one in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. And there should be unity with the church as there is unity with the Father and the Son. And we have all this, like there is division in the church. And when I say the church, I mean...
First of all, there's division among people's opinions of the church. That's called denominationalism.
That was the point that I was getting to.
Yeah.
Is that you can have denominations and still be one.
Right.
That they're completely different.
Mm-hmm.
It defeats the purpose of one. Christ set up one church because we are to be one with him as he is one with the Father.
Mm-hmm.
And we miss that.
And how do you get to that oneness? You come to the cross. Because that's where he draws all people to himself.
That's where it starts.
Right.
You have to make that first step. And the first step... with I know, I'm getting riled up because I'm like in my head. So
this is super fun to watch. I'm sorry the rest of you can't, but...
The reason there is denominationalism is because someone thinks that they are right.
Instead of thinking Jesus is right.
And in order to get it right, in order for there to be one church, we can't be right.
Right.
We have to surrender. Just like we said, 15 minutes ago?
Yeah.
We have to surrender to the cross. We have to go to the cross, not as ourselves, not saying that we are right, but saying that we trust in what he is doing and that he is right.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can only be one with him and the Father if we give all that up.
Mm-hmm. The message of John is pretty well captured in that idea that, well, he has the 7 I am statements throughout John.
Mm-hmm.
I am the way, the truth, and the life is one of them. I am the door. I'm the only way to do this. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I am the light of the world. I am the bread of life. I am the resurrection and the life. All of those are singular. All of those are, it's me or it's nothing.
Man, and I'm looking through this again, and it's the fact that Jesus is pleading for this.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he's praying to the Father, he's
well, first of all, he's hours from death. Like he knows what's at stake here.
And so you see that emotional side.
Mm-hmm.
And
the unity of the church
that's what he really that's
in Christ's mind. The unity of his followers is what makes his sacrifice worth doing.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to put that. Because what's really going to be on your mind at the time of death? The things that are most important to you.
And he's praying for his apostles, and he's praying for the people who are going to believe because of them to be unified.
That gets in the feels, man.
Yeah. Especially because I'm so bad at that. Like, even within the one church, the one true church, there's the tendency to want my way.
Right. And yeah. And surrender. That's all it is, man.
Yep.
And Jesus finishes it by saying, I have declared them your name and will declare it, that the love with which you loved me may be in them and I in them.
Yeah. It only works because God is who he is. So let's close at the beginning. Let's go back to chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word.
Mm-hmm.
The Word was with God.
Mm-hmm.
The Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. Without him, nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and this life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Skip down to verse 14. And the Word, the one who is in the beginning, the one who is life and light, the one through whom everything is created. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, glory as of the only begotten one of the Father, full of grace and full of truth. It's the two-step process. First, I have to recognize somebody who was in the beginning, somebody who was there before I was, somebody through whom I exist. I only exist because he's there, and somebody who makes life good. There's so much about life that's worth knowing and worth experiencing, and he's the reason for all of it. He came and he brought two things. He brought grace and he brought truth. He brought the way that I could be good enough, and he brought the map to show me how to get there. He's king. To me. He's the only one who can do that.
And that kind of ties back with us thinking we can do it ourselves. We weren't there in the beginning. We weren't there with God to make everything. We weren't there with the plan. We didn't know the plan. There is no plan without Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so to think that we can do it on our own,
and we don't know grace and truth.
It's ludicrous.
Right. Like, we can't logic our way into his view of us, or his view of anything, really. He's the only one that knows both grace and truth perfectly, and how to balance them.
Yep. He is the true light. Anything else that tries to mimic that is false.
I could follow him. That's the message of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's
because
as we're making this transition from Gospels to the rest of the New Testament, that's the question that's laid before people. This is who Jesus is. Could you follow him?
It is universal.
Could you do anything that he said?
Anybody could. Anybody
can, but it has to be a true decision. You can't just be doing it because other people want you to. You can't just be doing it because you think it's what's expected.
If it's forced, it's not honest.
Right.
Yeah. Because you're not... Here's the thing. All right. Call back. If it's forced, then you are not truly surrendering.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to be cleansed by the blood, you have to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to actually surrender.
It has to be a genuine commitment.
Yes. Yep.
And that's basically what the book of Acts is the story of that genuine commitment and what it looks like.
Talk about a cliffhanger. Yeah, that's the cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to leave you.
See you in 2 weeks. It'd be really funny if I just hit the stop button, but no, I'm not that mean.
That's what I tell my students all the time. When they're like, Mr. Luckett, are you going to make us do this? I'm like, no. I'm mean, but I'm not that kind of mean.
Yeah.
You know? Tell somebody about Jesus. Tell somebody about how you've surrendered. And if you haven't surrendered, what a time to do it.
As two people who know what the family of God looks like, I'll speak for both of us. Do it.
Most of the time, I'm not comfortable with you speaking for me, but right there, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but 100%, like, do it.
And if you're hesitant, if you are unsure, if you feel like you don't know enough, or if you're not good enough,
Well, that last one is not true. Because, well, okay, it is true, but it's true in the sense that nobody's good enough.
If you feel like you're...
But he is.
If you feel like you can't do it, if you feel like it's not for you, it is. I promise you it is. It is for everyone. It's universal. He didn't die for a select number of people. He died for you.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about the cross. At the same time that he's dying for everyone, at the same time that, like, his arms are open to everyone,
it's for you.
He's specifically thinking about you.
At the same time that he's thinking about me.
Right.
That's, oh, man. All right, yeah, we need to know on that one.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here. Thanks for making some sort of commitment, because
we're 4 Gospels in, so.
Yeah. We're looking forward to the rest.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Valley Bible Studies podcast.
Attaboy.
Throw that one in.
Attaboy.
All right, we'll see you in a couple weeks when we go over Acts.
See you in Acts.